Thank you. Thank you. It's quite an interesting time that we live in, and drones have really become a topic that no matter where you go, people are talking about it. And so we're going to look at a few different things in regards to drones and how we're using them for social good. So my name is Romeo Durscher. I work at DJI, and that by itself is a very fascinating story. We have a Chinese consumer manufacturing company that's world leading. That has never happened before. So a lot of interesting pieces are coming together in all of this. And over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to be taking you through a variety of different scenarios, and I'm a storyteller, so forgive me if I'm going to be telling a story, but I promise you I will make it fascinating and interesting. So this is a picture of your beautiful city, not from a drone, because there are height limits in most countries around the world, but this is from the International Space Station, taken right over Seoul, Korea. And I used to work at NASA, and NASA does one thing really, really well, and that is science, technology, engineering, and math outreach, STEM. STEM in the United States is a big topic, but there is a component missing, a very important component missing. And at DJI now, I have the ability to utilize that missing component, and that is the A for arts. And it's STEAM, because we cannot forget that a lot of people are artistically inclined. They're not scientists, they're not into technology, they have problems with math, but boy, give them some paint and colors and a canvas, and they create art. So, here's something I have learned. A picture of myself flying a drone ended up on the Associated Press. And if there is a formula, something really interesting happens. And the formula is a crazy drone story and a lazy journalist. If you add those two together, you get something like this. Drone reportedly collides with passenger plane in London, and there's a picture of me flying my drone. Drone knocks woman unconscious at Seattle Pride Parade. And guess what? There's a picture of me flying my drone. Drone war. German court throws out case by family of slain Yemenis. And there is my picture again. If you believe the American media, I have really done it all. Including I can spy on people. Now this one I really like because it makes me look like a teenager. That's not too bad, right? Man accused of using drone to spy on hospital patients is acquitted. And there is my picture again. But boy, it gets better. I promise you, I did not do this. This is the only one that is photoshopped, because if you have a headline that says, drone follows woman from bar, crashes into her car, you can only have a picture like that. My point is, the way we see and learn from media shapes public opinion. And what we have learned over the last couple of months is something that we want to see more, and that is, drones are here for a positive purpose. And we're going to look at that a little bit more. But before we can dive into this, I have to give you a little bit of background information on not only myself, how I got into this, but the industry by itself. So this is the very first time I took a droney. A droney is a selfie taken by a drone. And that sparked my interest in aerial photography. And so I decided, you know what, let's see where else I can put myself and take a picture with the drone. And if you look very closely, you can see me on top of this rock, and now you get scale. You can see how large this wave is. So aerial photography allows us to see our environment in a completely different way. So then I decided, well, why don't I go and travel with a drone? So I started traveling and I started visiting some of the most beautiful areas, and I would use my drone to create aerial art, like here in Paris, or then in Riga, Latvia, or Hong Kong, or Cabo San Lucas in a very creative way, or yesterday, your beautiful city. And this is interesting because you have an official drone park in your city. And so I went to visit it, and I took an aerial panorama of it. So as you can see, drones are not only here to showcase what aerial technology can do from an artistic perspective, but you can actually go and meet people. I was on the field and I met someone at the field that I had been in touch via social media, but we had never met before, and we just happened to be at the same time at the same field. Imagine that. So, now let's look at DJI a little bit, because we need to understand the whole concept of how does DJI fit into all of this. So, DJI is 11 years old. It's a fairly young company, but it is now the leading manufacturer of consumer and commercial drones. And the big change happened around 2013 when the first Phantom drone was released. And the Phantom drone is that white drone that most everyone has already seen a picture of. And from there, things really became interesting, because now we started seeing drones that had integrated cameras, that had stabilization systems to really provide incredible strong footage, but that also made flying very easy. The company itself grew dramatically. 3 years ago, when I joined DJI, there were 1,200 people working there. Today, we're over 11,000. That by itself, that growth by itself is challenging. Even though the headquarters is in Shenzhen, China, it is a global company. And that's a very fascinating part, because we're not only seeing drones being used in the United States or in Europe, but we're really seeing it being deployed all over the world. And what started out as a consumer company, a company that produced hardware from camera stabilization technology to flying drones for the everyday consumer, for the artists, turned out to be something very different today. We created these platforms for the everyday person that wanted to go to the park, that wanted to go skiing and maybe take a very fun video. And so much has changed that we're now seeing drones being used in public safety, in construction, in inspection, in agriculture, in media. We are seeing the change from a consumer product into a commercial enterprise tool. So that brings me to drones for good. And let's look at a few examples of what we've done in very recent history. So for example, after the big earthquake in Nepal, teams went down to Nepal and they helped map areas of destruction, and then not only mapped them, but printed them on large canvases and put them on the ground and brought the village together. Together with the people who live in that village, they looked at the buildings, they looked at the destruction, and they worked together on figuring out which buildings needed to be built or fixed faster than others because they had more importance, because they were either hospitals or banks or any structure of importance. So it became really a community project. The refugee crisis around the Greek coastline, we were seeing hundreds of makeshift boats come across with refugees that had spent days and weeks trying to find a new place, that were tired, and those boats sometimes didn't hold up, and and they had to swim. And thanks to drones, we were able to spot these refugees in the water much faster, send out boats, pick them up, and save many lives. Texas floodings. This is a very interesting case because actually one of my very good friends, he attached a lifeline to a drone and flew it across to the people that are in that house so that they could rescue them. So we're now seeing drones carrying life-saving equipment, and that's a major change in the way we think about this technology. Now let's move to just the last 3 months. In around the end of August, we had Hurricane Harvey. And Hurricane Harvey in Texas was massive. 20 trillion gallons of rain. That's about what New York City needs for 5 decades. That's a tremendous amount of water. There was a tremendous amount of flooding that Moody's analysts say roughly $100 billion in damage. 185,000 homes were destroyed. And by the end of August, there were still 200,000 people that had no power. So we had drone operational teams, public safety teams, use drones to go and assist during search and rescue operations. They would also go and scan areas of interest, for example, levees and riverbeds, to see if they had any sort of breaches so that they could prevent any further floodings. They would use them to do inspection of facilities that were flooded, like this water plant here that was completely flooded, no access by foot, so they used the drone to go and inspect it, or to go and inspect buildings where actually people were still living in and it was completely unsafe. Then just a few weeks later, Hurricane Irma happened in Florida. And this was another massive hurricane that struck and had high winds, a very large eye of the hurricane, and destroyed along the way Caribbean islands, just massive. In Florida itself, about a quarter of homes were destroyed. 1.7 million people had no power. Majority of utilities were out. So what happened was initially 16 teams, later on 22 UAV teams got deployed right before Irma hit Florida. And as soon as the winds were okay, they started flying utility inspection projects. They were looking for power masts. They were looking for cell phone towers, looking for the damage, reporting that damage back to utility companies so that they could already send out help or repair work much faster with more information than they were able before. And here's a very sad topic close to where I live, the wildfires in California, especially the one over the last 3 to 4 weeks in Santa Rosa, Napa Valley, Sonoma Valley. Very destructive. And I spent actually the last couple of weeks there using drones to assist in a variety of different scenarios, and seeing that destruction that Mother Nature has, in this case fire, and then seeing how drones are being used to not only map areas, but to help with recovery efforts. Amazing. Here's a 360-degree panorama I took of one particular community that got completely destroyed. There is nothing standing except a couple of trees. So what we did here is we actually took a 3D map. We flew the drone, we created data, we built a 3D map. And these types of maps are extremely helpful because they show not only the destruction, but now you can start forensics on it. You can start overlaying computer graphics to recreate what happened. And you can also use all that data to help the public understand what actually did happen during an incident. Last year, we did a project on the Adamello Glacier, and that project was, in essence, to really figure out how would drone technology help mountain search and rescue operations. And we went up onto the Edemelo Glacier, and we used drones to see mountaineers incorporating this technology into their everyday tasks. And what we learned was very, very interesting. It was not only a beautiful environment to be in it, but watching these professionals trying to figure out how to best utilize this technology was very interesting. We did, again, maps of the glaciers. We provided these maps to the mountaineers. They could look at data that was only an hour old, and they could plan their ways across glaciers. So what we learned is actually very interesting. Drones have really evolved from a flying device to a data collection device. And the drone has become a decision-making tool because it is providing data to the operator or incident command that can help make a better and faster decision. And when it comes to search and rescue operations, the application is not just trying to find an individual, but knowing where the individual is not is also very helpful because you can do resource management. You can send out teams to different areas then without having that information. Another project we did with the UNDP, the United Nations Development Program Office, was on the Maldives. The Maldives, almost 1,200 islands, roughly 360,000 people, and 80% of those islands are only 1 meter above sea level. Now, if you believe it or not, we have climate change issues, and it is impacting us across the world. And on the Maldives, they see an increase in storms, they see more flooding, and they see more erosion. And so with the UNDP together, we wanted to see how could drones help the people on the Maldives. And let's figure out what is it that is lacking. And in their case, it's a lack of preparedness. When you have 1,200 islands that you need to cover, that's a huge challenge already. So here is what we did. There is some sound to it, so if we don't get the sound, then I will narrate it. So we did go to these islands. We visited some of these very far removed islands from Mali, and we tried to learn what is it that these people are dealing with. And some of these islands are very, very small. They have not a lot of land available, so they farm themselves. But every time there is a big storm that comes in, there's chance of flooding, taking out some of their crops or some of their farms. And so they're losing not only income, but they're losing ground of their islands. So it's eroding, it's going away, it's falling into the water almost. So we wanted to take the technology and we wanted to teach the locals how to use it so that they can start mapping their own islands. And by doing that, by mapping your island, several times a year, you can start comparing your models with each other. And you gather data. You can see what changes have happened over the last duration between different models. You can learn about if there is an incident and we need to send the Coast Guard, for example, where is it safe for them to go on land and evacuate? So there's a lot of data that can be of help, but it has to come from within the community. The communities, they have to learn how to utilize the technology. They need to feel ownership. And if we can achieve that, then these individuals, these communities, these islands, they will try and incorporate the technology because they own it. So this was a very, very interesting experience because you're bringing technology to areas where there is little technology. On some of these islands, there's very little technology, and yet you're bringing this most modern piece of technology that autonomously flies, takes data, and provides everyone with a completely different view. And merging those two can always have challenges. So now, what does the future look like? Well, if you look at this image here, this is what flooding would look like from a drone. And if you were the first responder and you would have to navigate yourself through all of this, this is difficult. The landmarks are gone or flooded. But what if you have now augmented reality overlays that are live? So suddenly you have street names, you have house numbers, you can even outline where the emergency calls come from. Or if it's a fire incident, and you can see what unit numbers, what house numbers are right next to it, the street numbers, that is incredible helpful information to an operator. In fact, augmented reality now can allow you to do training scenarios. Like in this case, this house is actually not on fire. But with augmented reality, we can overlay a building on flames, we can overlay smoke, and now a training exercise becomes just so much more real. If we look at things through a thermal camera, it can get overwhelming. Look at all these colors. We're not used to that. We look at life through our own eyes in a very different spectrum, and suddenly when we see this, it can be overwhelming. If you need to make a decision quickly, this could be too much information. But what if we just stripped out and showed what's important, the hotspot? And suddenly, if you are a fireman or a firewoman, you would immediately know where in the building is that hotspot, and you could approach the rescue operation very differently. What about aerial live streaming of footage? Let's say your incident command is 50 kilometers away, 100 kilometers away, 1,000 kilometers away, and they need to see exactly what you're seeing in the field with little to no delay. That is the future. That is what's happening right now, where drone footage is streamed live to an incident command center. And that brings me to education, because all of this is only possible if there is education. The opportunity ahead is tremendous. Goldman Sachs estimates that within the next 3 years, 4 years, there's a market of $100 billion. And that market is really driven in these sectors. These are tremendous numbers of possibilities that are out there for a technology that is so new. And what does that mean? That means that in the United States alone, 100,000 new jobs are coming out of this industry by 2025. That means that we need to educate our future operators and future users of these drones in different ways, that they understand how to utilize the technology. And it means that we have an opportunity to really use this technology in fun ways in the classroom, because as we've been hearing all day long, our model of education that we've had for almost 200 years just doesn't work as perfectly anymore as it used to. So we can now really expand the way we want to educate and how we can incorporate this technology into academia, so that by the time we have 100,000 new jobs, that our workforce is ready to take on those jobs. And there is another movie, and it probably will also not have sound, so I'm gonna try to narrate this one as well. So we did this summer a project in New York City. And in New York City right now, there's also the very first DJI has landed on the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum. The Intrepid is hosting one of the very first drone exhibits called Drones. Is the Sky the Limit? This DJI-sponsored exhibit really showcases the history of unmanned aerial vehicles and also displays what this technology has already provided in many different areas, such as agriculture, public safety, and arts. We will also be meeting with young students and inner city kids. Together, we will explore the physics of flight. We will talk about drones, how drones operate, what are the important components, and what else is needed to really use these platforms in valuable and beneficial ways.
The Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum is an amazing museum where we blend history, the humanities, and STEM. There's a rich history here of innovation. And so we really take that idea and run with it in exhibitions like Drones is the Sky the Limit. In the education department, we are now starting to use drones in our demonstrations, in our family programming, and also in our camps. This summer we're running our Camp Intrepid, which is incorporating drones into several of the lessons, exploring topics such as programming and aerospace design. The fantastic thing about using drones in the classroom is that kids already know about them. They're interested in them, they've heard of them, maybe they even own them. So the ability to give them something that they can immediately relate to is really fantastic. They want to know so much about them, more than just what can I do with this at home, but what can I do with it in the future.
So like you could have a smaller drone going into a small space and then finding the bigger area and a bigger way to enter in.
You know, this is the way you inspire the next wave of engineers, the next wave of filmmakers, the next wave of photographers. And we want to give students those tools. We want them to understand how to use them, because when we take that knowledge and apply it, that's when really incredible things can happen.
I learned about drones and how they fly and work. I think I liked the small one because if I had the small one, I would just stuff it in a very small place and it wouldn't be too big to fit in my room.
So as you can see, this technology, as brand new as it is, has a lot of potential, and there are also challenges. There are a lot of challenges. There are challenges, concerns from the public about either privacy or the safety aspects. There are regulatory concerns, and there are even countries that completely forbid the use of drones. So as a society, every single time when new technology has been introduced and has come along, it took us time to really figure out how to best utilize it, how to best frame the legal framework around the technology so that we can utilize that particular technology. And I don't think this is any different. So it's an exciting time. It's a time that does bring change, that does bring something very, very different. And it's also a time to really learn and explore what is possible. Thank you.